Welcome, my friends, to our lecture on task analysis. I love this little quote: statistics can be made to prove anything, even the truth. I wished I knew who that could be credited to. That is a tremendous, tremendous saying. In this module, we're going to provide insight into the following. We're going to provide an overview of task analysis, an assessment of task difficulty, development of a skill hierarchy, and the outcomes of a skill hierarchy. An overview of task analysis. The task analysis is an analysis of how a task is accomplished. A task analysis, of course, may include any or all of the following components: a detailed description of both manual and mental activities. Activities are not just things they do, they are calculations that must be made in the mind. Can cover task frequency, allocation, complexity, environmental conditions, necessary clothing and equipment, and the list could go on and on. Any other factors involved in or required for one or more people to perform a given task. Task analysis develops a plan to move from point A at the beginning to point Z with the completion of the task that is being studied. Information, of course, from a task analysis can be used for many purposes, and some examples are personnel selection, training design. The list is actually endless. Now, the overview of task analysis, it usually involves 6 steps. These are a little bit simplistic, and we'll go into a little bit greater detail in module 3, in part 3. But the first is to observe the task as it is being done, then interview an expert performer. I used to laugh sometimes, when I taught public school. I had kids that would cheat, and invariably they would try to cheat off of someone who didn't know what they were doing. If you're going to cheat, my advice to them is cheat off somebody who's going to get it correct. In this, if you're going to observe a task and you're going to interview an performer, choose an expert performer, someone who is doing the task correctly. Interview the supervisor of the typical performer about the task. Develop a task force to establish a support mechanism for standardization of the task. Brainstorm then improvement strategies with a target population of performers, and then validate all activities with a final observation. Now, in developing a skill hierarchy is a tool that contains all the skills needed to complete a specific task and explains how the skills are related to each other. Skills hierarchy in many circles is called a pyramid of objectives. You might remember seeing Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a pyramid. Well, some folks stole this with skill hierarchies and thought it was a very good visual representation of how skills might be developed or how they might be learned. Skill hierarchies delineate which skills must be learned before others can be attempted. This is often represented visually as a pyramid. The ability to draft a skill hierarchy is one of the most important steps in performance analysis. And it generally begins with what needs to be done, develops a list of skills required to complete the task, and establishes a relationship between those skills. And a plan for developing a skills hierarchy follows. Phase 1, derive your hierarchy using a top-down procedure. Begin with a terminal objective, and I'll give you an example here. If dealing with auto repair, an objective could read, given access to all tools, materials, standard equipment, and a flat tire, having a single puncture, repair the tire, time limit 20 minutes. Given your terminal objective, give that terminal objective a shorthand name or simple way to refer to the objective. 2 rules for choosing a shorthand name are: the action is always described, followed by the object of the action. Examples of shorthand names might be repair flat, fix flat tire. Now, phase 2, make a skills list, and the review of the terminal objectives and answer this question: what are the most essential skills that made up this activity? What does someone need to do, be able to do before being able to perform or practice the terminal skill? Summarize each of the skills then. In phase 3, make a draft of the hierarchy, locate the major or most complex subskills and list them under the terminal objective. Certainly you would want to test whether the skills are independent of one another. You don't want to have the same skill listed under different names. Do this by asking of each pair of skills, is it true that either of these skills can be learned without knowing how to do the other one? If so, place them side by side. If one cannot be learned before the other has been learned, place the subordinate skill under the other one. So you're determining a relationship, are they equivalent, or is one precedent to the other? Now, phase 3, make a draft of the hierarchy. Stop just before the point where there would be absolutely no disagreement about whether the population has a skill in question. If there's no debate that these folks coming in already possess the skill, there's no reason to put it in the hierarchy. If every one of them possess it, it's just indisputable that they all hold that skill. Why do you need to do that? There's just some things like they can read. Well, if all of your employees can read, then you don't need to list that. Can read English, or might be more important that they be able to understand that. Read at a certain level. You add the remaining skills to the hierarchy, placing them under the skills that they are subordinate to draw the lines between the skills. And then in making a draft of the hierarchy, you draw lines to show the relationship between the skills. You're trying to draw a picture of what is occurring, and I suggest to you that you have a very large piece of paper and several copies of it that you can work with. Push the pieces around until you are satisfied you can describe and defend your hierarchy to someone else. Remember, it goes from point A to point Z. Do you have it laid out? You start here, you finish here, and you have a clear sequence. In phase 4, you need to test the hierarchy to assess the appropriateness of the depiction of skill relationships. For each pair of skills connected by vertical lines, ask, is it true that one cannot practice this skill before they can practice this skill? Now, that ensures that you have them in the proper hierarchy. If that statement is not true, then the upper skill is not dependent on the lower one, and you would place them side by side in the hierarchy. For each pair of horizontal skills, is it true that either of these skills could be learned before the other is learned? If not, then one of the skills should be shown as a prerequisite to other on the hierarchy. Add subordinate skills where they seem to be missing, and in your evaluation, just see if you missed some steps, and modify the hierarchy to reflect needed changes. Now, the outcomes of a skill hierarchy is really interesting. A skill hierarchy, again, is a graphical representation of the skills any learner must possess in order to meet the learning objective. The skill hierarchy shows the relationships among the required skills, and it determines the sequence of learning the skills that is part of the new task and identifies prerequisites to learning to do the new task. A skills hierarchy certainly can be a very useful tool for mastering a complicated job that requires numerous skills and tasks to be taught. This knowledge, which is provided by a skills hierarchy, can certainly guide employment practices and help you to establish training strategies. How did we do? I know that we went through this a little bit quickly, but that's just the nature of developing video. We set out to provide you an overview of task analysis, an assessment of task difficulty, a plan to develop a skills hierarchy, and discuss with you some of the outcomes of a skills hierarchy. Did we do what we said we would do? That's an interesting point. I hope that you're comfortable with the material that we've covered. I certainly encourage you, if you're not, to watch the video again. Go through it, dissect it. You'll get it down. Now, I want to thank you again very much for your support. As always, your patronage keeps my family fed. I appreciate you watching these videos. I hope that you got what you sought out of them. You have a great day.